Good evening and a very happy Friday night to you. I hope you've had a great week so far. You've reached the online campus for Church of the Redeemer. I'm Father Charleston, and I'm so glad you're here. If this is your first time being with us online, welcome, welcome, welcome. I hope you will consider going deeper and deeper with us, and I hope you'll even join us as members of the parish. You can email me at cwilson@redeemersarasota.org, or you can call me at the parish office, and I'd love to get to know you on your journey, and we could journey together. Happy Friday evening. I hope you've had a good week. It's a little bit odd when you think of the 2,000 years of the Christian tradition to say a happy Friday. Fridays traditionally have been reserved for Christians as we focus on our Lord's Passion. And that's really good because tonight we are focusing on part 2 of a series, Jesus, the friend of sinners. I need to say that I got the cart a little bit ahead of the horse last time. In hindsight, and practically speaking, what I did as part 1 last Friday really could have been part 2. So I want to go back and answer some more basic things. In my mind, this is really part 1. And we'll just say this series has been like Star Wars so far. You remember the first release was a later episode. So this is part 2, but it's really part 1. Are you dizzy yet? All right, let's go back. I need to get foundational. Let's go back. Let's back it up. Beep, beep, beep. Jesus, the friend of sinners. Where did the phrase friend of sinners originate? Where did this come from? Is this something I've cooked up to just tell a tale? Well, I didn't. Jesus was called the friend of sinners in the Bible. Specifically in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, in 2 places, in chapter 9 and chapter 11. And he was called the friend of sinners by none other than the Pharisees. Now, the Pharisees meant it as a put down. It would be like somebody going, "There's Charleston, the great athlete, because I surely ain't." It's an insult. It was intended as an insult. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, which is a lie. This was meant to hurt. The self-righteous, holier-than-thou Pharisees didn't hang around with people they deemed sinners or tax collectors. But Jesus did. He didn't just speak to them in passing, as we might speak to someone on the street, even someone we disdain. He even went into their homes and had dinner, broke bread, seated at table with them. Now, the great irony is the Pharisees, who were certainly experts at sin, but didn't want to face it, much like you and I. The ultimate irony is these experts in sin are insulting the one in whom there is no sin. As St. Paul said, you remember it, for our sake, he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God, that gorgeous phrase to the church in Corinth. This really leads me to a word of caution before I move any further. More importantly than the fact that Jesus, like Garth Brooks, has friends in low places, more important that Jesus' seeming preference for spending time, that his preference is spending time with misfits, half-breeds, and crooks, with those of us who don't have it all together, with those of us who have questionable pasts, shaky presents, and unknown futures. More than that is what he did while he was hanging out with sinners. What happened as a result, in other words? So the question is this: what happens when Jesus hangs out with sinners? What does it mean to be the friend of sinners? Is it that Jesus prefers American Pie, the movie? Or is it something else? Is it that Jesus has a fatal attraction to sinners? That argument certainly can be made convincingly. Is it that Jesus just needs to blow off a little steam after being perfect all day? Or is there something else going on? Is it as simple as opposites really do attract? Or is it something more? Can there be another way of looking at it? I want to suggest another viewpoint. What if it isn't so much Jesus who is drawn to sinners as it is that sinners are drawn to Jesus? What if it isn't so much Jesus who is drawn to hang out with sinners, but it's really that sinners, you and I, are drawn to Jesus? Let me read a passage from the Gospel according to St. Mark. Once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. A large crowd came to see him, and he began to teach them. As he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. "Follow me," Jesus told him, and Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner, newsflash, while Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him, for there were many who followed him. When the teachers of the law, who were Pharisees, saw him eating with sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, "Why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." And here's the key phrase: "I have come not to call the righteous, but sinners." I have come not to call the righteous, but to call sinners. So Jesus tells us that he calls sinners to himself. That it's not so much that he enjoys evenings at the Memories Lounge on North Tamiami Trail. That it's more than being a friend with whom we just pal around and take to UTC when there's a sale at Saks. That it's more than that he's drawn to our mischief. It's that he calls us to his holiness. And this is good news because he is something called indiscriminate. And he's the hound of heaven. He's not even waiting on us to phone a friend, to call out to him. The call comes from him to each of us, and it stands today. And when Jesus calls, he has a purpose. And the voicemail, the text, the direct word is always the same. First of all, he doesn't call people who just need a little help or just want to get a little better or even want to hang out at the club. He calls sinners who are sin sick and need the mercy, grace, and balm only the great physician can offer. To people who don't need to become better people who mind their P's and Q's. Not so much the folks who want to get Sarasota Magazine Philanthropist of the Year, but folks like you and me who've come to realize that new life, that real life, a total tear down and rebuild is what we seek and what we need, and only he can provide it. He calls people like you and me who know we are absolutely lost without him because he is the friend of sinners. As he said himself, "For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost." May I ask you, dear viewer, a question? What happened when Jesus called you? When he came into your life in a very real way? If you want to sort of test the waters, if you want a sort of saved sinner's mood ring or barometer, let me offer a few things that happen when Jesus, our friend, comes into our lives. The first thing is the thirst is quenched. We recognize simultaneously that we were spiritually dehydrated, but all of a sudden we're spiritually satisfied all at once. That's one thing that you and I can check to be aware of our Lord's presence in our lives. Another thing is joy. To have the joy of the Lord. What's the old Protestant hymn? Down in our hearts. We begin to have real joy. Joy that is not a feeling, but is a reality because we have peace with God. And that's the peace that passes all understanding. Another thing that happens when the friend of sinners is with us, we begin to want others to have the peace that you and I have. We begin to see that this relationship with the Trinity through Jesus in the power of the Spirit is not a secret recipe that we want to hide and profit privately from. It's something that we want even our worst enemy to know. We find ourselves praying that so-and-so, that one person that drives us bonkers, will also answer the phone when Jesus calls, because he is calling. And ultimately, you and I discover something called grace. You know I bang on and on about that word. Grace is the undeserved, unmerited, yet constant love of God given freely to unworthy sinners for life and salvation. May I end this brief time tonight with a quote. I've been rereading from J.I. Packer, the great evangelical Anglican. Although I'm a Catholic Anglican, I think it's great to read from all parts of the church. In his great book, Knowing God, Packer writes these words. In the New Testament, grace means God's love in action towards people who merit the opposite of love. Grace means God moving heaven and earth to save sinners who could not lift a finger to save themselves. Grace means God sending his only Son to the cross to descend into hell so that we guilty ones might be reconciled to God and received into heaven. Do you know Jesus, the friend of sinners? Join me for part 3, Jesus, the friend of sinners, next week. God bless you, and I wish you a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Good night.